Hi, welcome us from my side. Briefly introduction of me. I'm a product manager at SEEBURGER and deal with the topic of global invoicing. So in other words, everything to do with legal requirements for electronic invoicing worldwide. And yeah, let's start. First, let's have a look at the agenda. And I will start with the B2B invoicing mandate in Germany. Then I will talk about Vida. What is Vida? Then about the three-pillar reform. Then about the goals of the new framework. Then about the invoicing models. And at the end, I will talk about SEEBURGER, how SEEBURGER can help you with our solutions. Yeah, looking back, the first steps toward the new law started when the German Ministry of Finance announced in March 2023 that the VAT rules would be updated. This marked the beginning of the legal process for introducing mandatory invoicing. In April and May 2023, the first draft of the law was published, an important step toward making invoicing mandatory. And then between September and November 2023, changes were made to the draft law and the Finance Committee discussed it in detail. The goal was to create a practical and efficient solution for businesses in Germany. Yes, and on December 15, 2023, preparations for the final decision on the Growth Opportunities Act were made. This law provides the legal basis for mandatory invoicing. A compromise version of the law was proposed by the Mediation Committee on February 21, 2024. The Bundestag, so the German Parliament, approved it on February 23, 2024, and the Bundesrat, the Federal Council, gave its final approval on March 2022 and in 2024, yes. And yeah, on October 15, 2024, the Ministry of Finance will publish final guidelines on how invoices should be issued according to the paragraph 14 of the VAT law. And now, this year, the introduction of invoicing will happen in steps. So the official start of mandatory invoicing in the B2B sector is on January 1st. So it already started. And then the transition period until 2028. So the companies have until January 1st, 2028 to fully switch their processes. This step-by-step approach gives especially small businesses enough time to adapt and helps push digitalization forward in German invoicing systems. Yes, as you may already know, and I already said it, on October 15, the German Ministry of Finance published a document to prepare companies for an important change in invoicing. Since January 1st, 2025, electronic invoices have become mandatory for domestic B2B transactions in Germany. This rule is part of the Growth Opportunities Act, which updated the invoicing rules in paragraph 14 of the VAT law. This means that companies in Germany can no longer just send invoices as PDF or on paper. Instead, they must use electronic invoices that are structured and machine readable. However, there are some exceptions to the invoicing requirement. So the first one is tax-free transactions, and then small amount invoices of up to 250 euros. And yes, and tickets such as for buses and trains are also not included in the invoicing requirement. So there have also been important changes in how invoices must be issued. With the new rules, electronic invoices are now required for transactions between businesses within Germany, and invoicing must follow a structured electronic format that meets the European standard EN 16931. This rule applies to a taxable B2B transaction with both the seller and buyer are based in Germany, either with their main office, management, branch, or place of residence in the country. The customer's approval is no longer needed to send an invoice. This means companies must now make sure they are technically able to receive and process invoices. In some situations, it is still allowed to send other types of invoices instead of e-invoices. This includes sales to private individuals or non-business organizations, text-free transactions under paragraph 4 of the VAT law, such as certain medical or financial services. In these cases, it's still okay to send paper invoices or PDFs, but only if the recipient agrees to receive them electronically. Yes, and yeah, there have also been legal changes and new rules announced until the end of 2024. Companies choose whether to send invoices on paper or as an electronic invoices. An invoice could be just a PDF file or an email with invoice details, as long as the customer agreed. Using invoices was so optional, and even non-structured formats like PDFs were accepted as invoices. But that has changed completely starting in 2025. Now an electronic invoice is only valid if it is in a structured electronic format, sent and received electronically, and meets certain technical standards. So a simple PDF is no longer enough. The invoice must either follow the European standard EN 6931 or use another agreed format, as long as the data structure is still compatible with the EN 6931 standard. Since yes, and invoicing must meet 3 main requirements. So the first requirement is authenticity of origin, so proving who sent it, the integrity of content, so nothing has been changed, and readability, so the file can be read by machines, for example, an EN 6931 compliant XML file. Yes, these rules make sure that invoices are secure and can be processed automatically. So invoices that do not meet the new rules under paragraph 14 and sentence 6 of the VAT law are no longer considered invoices. This includes paper invoices, emails with PDF attachments, or image files. These are now called other invoices and are no longer allowed for domestic B2B transactions in Germany. Yeah. To help companies adjust to the new rules, transition periods have been introduced. While receiving invoices has been mandatory for all companies since this year, sending invoices will be required in phases until the end of 2027. Starting in 2028, sending invoices will be mandatory for everyone. So the first phase began on January 1st, 2025. So all companies must be able to receive invoices. That means they need a setup that can handle structured invoices in the EN 6931 format. A basic solution like a special email address or a digital mailbox is enough. For sending invoices, companies still have some flexibility. So invoices in EN 6931 format are allowed and preferred. Other electronic formats can still be used if both sender and receiver agree. Non-compatible formats can only be used with the receiver's permission. Paper invoices are still allowed. So in 2025, companies that are not yet fully ready can still send PDFs or paper invoices as long as the customer agrees. The rules in 2026 remains the same as in 2025. So let's have a look at the rules in 2027. So if a company had more than 800,000 euros in sales in 2026, it must send an invoice in the EN 6931 format. So non-compatible formats can only be used with the customer consent. Paper invoices are no longer allowed for these companies. But if a company had less than 800,000 euros in 2026, it can still send other formats if the customer agrees. But this option is only available until the end of 2027. Other companies may still send invoices using EDI systems if the receiver agrees. The rules from 2028, there will be a lot of another requirements. So there will be no more exceptions. So all companies, no matter the size or revenue, must send and receive invoices. So the paper invoices are completely banned, and non-compatible electronic formats are no longer allowed. Only EN 6931 invoices are accepted. Other interoperable formats are only allowed with both parties agree. This means that you must have a fully digital invoicing system. Anyone who does not switch by 2028 may face compliance issues and risk business problems. So now let's have a look at the topic Vida. What is the background of Vida? So value-added tax is one of the most important sources of the government income, not just in Germany, but across the entire EU. About 12% of the EU's budget comes from the value-added tax. That's why it's important that the VAT system is stable, efficient, and ready for the future. But here's now the problem. The current VAT rules are outdated. They were created at a time when most business was local, digital business models didn't exist, and cross-border online shopping wasn't common as now. This causes many challenges today. So VAT rules are different in every country, which makes compliance very difficult for businesses that work internationally. The administrative workload is high, so companies need to manage many systems, follow different rules, and meet local requirements. Tax authorities find it hard to track transaction completely, especially when sales cross borders. This makes it easier for tax fraud and VAT scams like carousel fraud to happen. The VAT gap report from the European Commission shows how serious this problem is. In 2021, about 61 billion euros in VAT was lost. That's about 9% of all expected VAT revenue. This VAT gap difference between what government should have collected and what they actually collected. So it's still a major issue, even though it is slowly decreasing. So this is actually where Vida comes in. Vida stands for VAT in the digital age and refers to the most comprehensive VAT reform since the introduction of the EU single market. It is an initiative of European Commission to modernize the European VAT system. So on 8th December 2022, the European Commission presented the long-awaited draft directive and a proposal for a corresponding EU regulation. So data subject to mandatory reporting, such as in the context of intra-community deliveries, should be able to be transmitted and verified more quickly and with transaction accuracy. The structuring and standardization of the information to be transmitted by a taxable person should take place almost in real time and in particular serve to speed up the detection of VAT fraud. So the main aim of Vida is therefore to create a more efficient, more digital and more transparent system for the fulfillment of VAT obligations with less administrative work for companies and at the same time greater protection against tax fraud. So who is bound by the new rules? The new system brings changes both for companies that provide services subject to VAT and for the member states of the European Union. For companies, this means that they must be prepared to issue and receive electronic invoices in the B2B area in the future and in a structured, standardized format. On the other hand, the member states themselves are responsible for integrating the new EU requirements into their national tax laws and processes. Among other things, they must ensure that the technical, legal, and operational framework conditions are created to enable the efficient and legally compliant recipient and processing of electronic invoices. So let's have a look at the timeline, the roadmap. So looking back to the time of the Vida reform, the EU introduced Vida on December 8th, 2022. So then in spring 2024, Vida was supposed to be approved, but Estonia blocked the decision during the EU finance ministers' meetings. So since unanimous agreement is needed for tax matters in the EU, the reform process was delayed. Yes, on March 11, 2025, and the reform was finally adopted on the third attempt. So it was a major milestone and cleared the way for harmonized VAT system across the EU. On the month after approval, Vida was officially started. From this point, all EU countries began the implementation phase. Yes, and looking to the future, on January 1st, 2027, a new EU-wide rule for online business will take effect. Then from mid-2028, business will only need one VAT registration for the whole EU, a big simplification. Then on July 1st, 2030, mandatory digital reporting and invoicing rules will apply across the EU. And the last one, on January 1st, 2035, all reporting rules for both domestic and cross-border transactions will be fully harmonized in the EU. So let's have a look at the three-pillar reform. As I already mentioned, the so-called Vida reform was adopted by the EU on 11th March 2025. This reform is based on a three-pillar model and aims to modernize the VAT system in the EU and adapt it to the requirements of the digital economy. So the first pillar promotes the mandatory introduction of electronic invoice in the B2B sector and the establishment of standardized and digital reporting system throughout the EU. The aim is to exchange tax information more quickly and transparently between member states. This should reduce tax fraud and at the same time increase efficiency and automation in tax processing. The second pillar is dedicated to the platform economy, so particularly in the areas of the short-term rental and passenger transport. Digital platforms are to take on a more active role in that collection in the future. This should ensure that tax fairness is also maintained in these areas. And the last, third pillar, is offering companies with cross-border activities a central point of contact for their VAT obligations in the EU. So instead of having to register in each individual EU country, companies will in the future be able to process their tax obligation via a single portal. So this saves time, reduces complexity, and significantly lowers administrative costs. But just have a look a bit closer about these pillars. So the first pillar, so from July 2030, a number of things will change. So companies will have to digitally report intra-community transactions. So transactions between companies in different EU countries to the tax authorities. This applies to both suppliers and their business customers, provided the transactions are B2B transactions. Yes. So what actually must be reported? For example, if goods are supplied or purchased within the EU, if services are provided across borders, if the reverse charge procedure applies, so the recipient owes the tax, energy complies to taxable traders, and also triangular transactions if three companies in three different countries are involved. The report must be submitted within 10 days of the so-called taxable event. This can be, for example, the delivery date or recipient of payment. Originally, the EU even wanted a deadline of just 2 days, but this was relaxed to give companies some breathing space. The notification itself is digital and structured, so no free text, but clearly defined fields. In addition to the classic information such as name, VAT ID, or amount, things such as bank details must also be included in the future. This should help the tax authorities to recognize suspicious transactions more quickly, and prevent fraud. And yeah, what does it mean for your technology, or for the technology? Each EU country can decide for itself how actually the data is transmitted, which format, which interfaces. This means that there will be differences between countries, similar to what we already know from invoicing. In some cases, incidentally, only the supplier or only the recipient may be obliged to report, depending on whether the tax authority already receives the information by other means. This can also be a small relief for companies. Yeah. And now for the electronic invoicing obligation. So for all cross-border B2B transactions within the EU, the following applies from July 2013. Paper invoices or simple PDFs are no longer permitted. They must be structured electronic invoices, so invoices that comply with the EU standard 16931. These therefore affects intra-community deliveries, services between companies in the EU. Also, Zugfahrt invoices are still possible, by the way, but only if they contain the structured XML format. As a rule, the invoice must be issued within 10 days of the taxable event. In the case of credit notes, even within 10 days of the delivery. Important is that the customer does not have to improve the electronic invoice. It is automatically recognized. And other crucial point, in the future, input tax can only be deducted or refund claimed with a structured invoice. So anyone who fails to do so will lose their entitlement. What else is the EU doing to control the whole thing? There will be a central European database, the so-called central THES. All reported transactions, or in German, MIAs, it depends on how you write it in English or in German, and then short it. Yes, and all reported transactions will be collected there, including VAT IDs and other tax-relevant information. Yeah, the platform serves several purposes. Companies can check whether their transactions have been recorded correctly. Tax authorities can recognize discrepancies more quickly, for example, in the case of carousel fraud. And the database will be linked to other EU systems, such as the assessor payment data system or the customs systems. What else is there to consider? Also, for purely national transactions, so within a country, existing systems such as SAFT may continue to be used, but they must be EU compatible. Collective invoices remain permitted under two conditions. The VAT include must be due in the same month. The invoice must be issued no later than the 10th of the following month. Yes, and for countries that have already introduced a national reporting system before 1st January 2024, the following applies, that these systems must be adapted to the new EU standard by July 2030 at the latest. There will be changes to the Pillar 1 in January 2035. It is planned that the currently very different national reporting system for electronic invoicing in EU member states will be replaced by a standardized European system. And this new system is to be based on a common Vida standard. Originally, this harmonization was to take effect as early 2027. But the EU Commission has now decided to postpone the start until January 2035. Why is this postponement? So member states above all Italy have already introduced their own national systems for electronic invoicing, or about to do so, but the tax authorities and companies have invested heavily in these systems. Switching to the new EU standard too early would have meant that these investments might have become useless, or additional complexity would have arisen. In order to organize this transition period sensibly, it was decided to make the EU standard mandatory at a later date. This gives both the countries and the companies more time for structured adaptations. And important to know, this later changeover, as I already said, only applies to member states that have already introduced a national invoicing system before 1st January 2024. So let's have a look at the second pillar of the the second pillar of the EU Vida initiative will come into force from January 2030. The so-called introduction of the mandatory platform economy. This concerns digital platforms that arrange short-term accommodation or carpooling. In future, these platforms will be regarded as so-called notional suppliers, and this means that they will have to calculate the VAT for the brokered services themselves and pay to the tax authorities instead of the actual suppliers. Yeah, there are two exceptions. If the supplier provides a valid VAT identification number and confirms that they reported the tax themselves. If the supplier qualifies as a small business and has registered for the EU special scheme from 2025. In addition, the definition of short-term rental has been limited to a maximum of 30 days across the EU. Travel agencies and services that fall under the TOMS regulation, so for example, package holidays, are exempt from the new regulation. Platforms remain obliged to record their brokered services and inform the customers, yes, if goods are moved across borders via them. It should be noted that there will be a voluntary introduction of the platform economy for carpooling and shared accommodation in July 2028. So the last pillar, so from 1st July 2028, there will be important changes in coming to force for companies in international trade, which will affect VAT registration in particular. These changes mainly concern the one-stop shop, which enables companies to manage their tax obligations in the EU more easily. So what actually will change? So in the future, companies that sell goods in the EU or more move their stocks across national borders will only have to register for that once. And this will be done centrally. This means no more tax confusion in each individual EU country. No additional registration, less and lower costs. And how does this work? So the existing OSS, the one-stop shop system, is being expanded to include a new module that allows companies to electronically report the movement of their goods within the EU. The whole process is then centralized via this portal. And another new feature is that other business transactions can be processed via OSS. So for example, when goods are delivered and installed at the same time, sales on board trains or planes or ships, the sale of energy via electronic systems. Yes, this means more process, a central point of contact, less effort. Another point concerns so-called consignment warehouses, so warehouses in which goods are stored until the customer actually calls them up. So from 1st July 2028, no new agreements may be concluded for such warehouses, and new rules will be applied to existing consignment warehouses from 30 June 2029. But the UOSS can also help here. So companies can continue to use the system to report the movement of goods digitally and in a legally compliant manner. Another important point, the rules on reverse charge will be standardized. This means that if a company delivers from abroad to a VAT registered company in Germany, VAT will in future be processed in a simplified manner via a centralized declaration. However, the individual EU countries may still introduce certain national peculiarities here, so there may be small differences depending on the country. And some special cases remain subject to reporting via the recapitulative statement. For example, deliveries that fall under the margin scheme or transaction involving works of art. So what are the goals of the new VAT framework? Vida, first, Vida ensures that online platforms and services, retailers, service providers work under the same conditions. This creates fair competition even across national borders. So then until now, batch reporting has often been, paper-based and inconsistent. So with Vida, invoice data is to be transmitted digitally to the tax authorities in a near real time in the future. This saves time, reduces errors, and makes the process more transparent. Then different deadlines and formats in every country should be a thing of the past. So Vida creates digital standards that make cross-border trade much easier for you. So real added value, especially for smaller companies. Vida simplifies the regulations and adapts them to today's economy. So for you, this means fewer exceptions, less uncertainty, and a reliable basis for your tax processes. In future, your ERP or accounting system will also be to communicate directly with the tax authority. This reduces manual steps and ensures end-to-end digital secure process from invoicing to reporting. The last one, so that fraud is a major problem in EU, as I already said, and Vida strengthens control through digital verification mechanism and better cooperation between authorities. And you benefit too, because honest companies are better protected. Yes, and in addition to the main objectives mentioned above, Vida also pursues the overarching goal of making administration fit for the future. So what are the benefits of the new VAT system? So first, saving through saving costs, so paper, printing, postage, physical archiving are a thing of the past. Electronic invoices are reports significantly reduce ongoing material costs and enable faster processing times. According to the European Commission, eliminating the need to send documents by post alone can save around 1 billion euros a year. Then Vida acts as a catalyst for digitalization in the company. Those who invest in modern systems not only benefit in terms of that, but also can digitally optimize related areas such as purchasing, accounting, or controlling. Then the standardized structured transmission of data provides tax authorities with a better basis of auditing. Queries can be clarified more quickly and clearly, and clean processes significantly reduce the audit effort. So Vida helps to reduce the VAT gap, tax gaps caused by errors or fraud. This strengthens public financing without placing greater burden on currently operating companies. The European Commission accepts the introduction of structured standardized reporting formats and increased use of digital control mechanism to generate additional tax revenue of 135 to 177 billion euros per year. This will strengthen the financing of public services without increasing the tax burden for correctly operating companies. The data transmitted the data will be transmitted almost in real time, and this creates a transparency and makes fraudulent schemes such as carousel trading much more difficult. This not only protects the tax authorities, but also companies that act in accordance with the law. Vida replaces many different individual national regulations with a standardized digital model. This makes implementation easier, especially for internationally active companies, and reduces training and conversion costs. So the two last points are that we have simplified cross-border trade, so standardized interfaces and digital process facility cooperation with tax authorities in other EU countries. This makes the processing of international business relationships more transparent and faster. And the last one is that you reduce process costs. So as you already know, a central component of this development are so-called CTC models, so continuous transaction controls. These models define the form in which invoices must be exchanged. checked and, if necessary, transmitted to the tax authorities. And depending on the country and legal requirements, these models differ considerably in some cases. So from centralized platforms to decentralized exchange systems, real-time reporting obligations. In the following, I would like to give you a brief overview of the most important CTC models. So the first one is the centralized exchange. With the centralized exchange, the invoice is first sent by the supplier to a service provider, who forwards it to a central platform of the tax authority. There, the invoice is checked and, after approval, sent to the customer service provider and finally to the customer themselves. This model is highly regulated and gives the state a centralized control authority. The second one is the decentralized model. The exchange of invoices between supplier and customer remains the responsibility of the companies involved and their respective service providers. So in contrast to the centralized model, the tax authority itself does not take over operational processing via a central platform. Instead, certain functions such as checking, validating, or forwarding tax relevant data are performed by certified service providers acting on behalf of the tax authority. A well-known example of the technical implementation of such a model is, for example, PayPal. Now, the real-time reporting. In the real-time reporting model, the invoice is sent directly from the supplier to the customer via a service provider without the need for prior government approval. At the same time, however, a report on a transaction is sent to the tax authority in real time. The next one is the interoperability model. So the supplier and the customer are each connected to their own service provider. These providers are in turn connected to each other in an interoperable manner. So they can therefore exchange digital invoice data with each other without media discontinuity. The tax office does not receive the invoice data in real time, and audits take place during the rentation period of tax documents. The last model is the cleans model. The invoices is first sent by the supplier via a service provider to the tax authority for verification. Only after a successful validation by the authority may the invoice be forwarded to the customer via the customer service provider. So the clearance model is partially regulated. So communication with tax authority is required by law, while the exchange within the customer is not mandatorily regulated. This model ensures that only officially verified invoices reach the customer and therefore offers a high level of tax security. But now, within the increasing spread of global e-invoicing mandates, a new model, the decentralized five-corner model, is increasingly crystallizing as a long-term goal for many countries. It is the model that was adopted for invoicing by the EU Vida in July 2030. This model was developed to drive the digitalization of the VAT system, combat tax fraud, and provide businesses with a modern, interoperable, and future-proof solution. It is being established as the new reference model for cross-border B2B invoicing exchange throughout the EU. However, it is not only the EU that is already focusing on these models, so also EU members, France, Belgium, Spain, and outside of the EU and the, for example, United Arab Emirates are already aligned their national e-invoicing system accordingly or have announced corresponding steps. This model is so becoming increasingly popular. So what is the five-corner model and how does it work? So the called five-corner model conceptually combines the decentralized model with the interoperability approach. So service providers must be certified by the tax authority and be able to process the invoices they receive. They must also act as an interface to issue invoice to buyers, either themselves or via other certified service providers. This requires the service providers to be connected to other providers in the market. Once these steps have been completed, the service providers transmit the processed invoice data to the text of this. The five-corner model relies heavily on the service providers as they take on more process in the model than in other models. They relieve their tax authorities in particular by taking over operational tasks. The tax authorities receive all tax relevant data from the service providers, which significantly reduce the effort required for support and platform maintenance. So the model consists of the following five corners. So the first one is the supplier of the goods or services, who creates the electronic invoice or at least the basic data. Then your service provider for electronic invoicing, who acts as the access point for forwarding the electronic invoice. Yes, often, especially in the case of cross-border invoicing, this creates an invoice according to local national standards. The buyer's invoicing provider, whose access point receives the supplier's invoice, and the buyer who receives the invoice for processing and payment. And the last one is the tax authority, usually supported by the service matter publisher, SMP, a register that stores the metadata for a document recipient in the PayPal network. And this technical basis is often the PayPal network, which enables standardized and secure communication between all parties involved, and it's the best known example of the five-corner model. So even if the Vida initiative is in the future and is being introduced gradually, and the following applies. So those who prepare early will gain clear advantages. Use the transition period to analyze your process, identify digital potential, and plan ahead strategically. So first, start by taking stock. How do invoicing, VAT reporting, and cross-border trade work today? Which system do you use? Are there any manual processes or media disruptions? And are you already using an invoicing solution? And is it Vida ready? Then, Vida is a European project, but the actual implementation is carried out by the individual member states. So it is therefore worth keeping a close eye on both EU-wide developments and national legislative initiatives. Check whether your current system, e.g. ERP, accounting, invoicing, can generate digital reporting data in Vida format. If it's not the case, you should consider suitable solutions or extensions that are an early stage with a focus on scalability, interoperability, and seamless integration. Then Vida is an opportunity to streamline existing processes and set them up digitally from end to end, from the quotation to the invoice to reporting to the text of this. The result is less complexity, more transparency, and better data quality. Then, involve your employees right from the start. Technically, conversion are only part of the change, at least as important your team. Plan training sessions, create transparency, and involve those affected at an early stage. Then rely on your right partners. You don't have to solve everything on your own. Get us involved at an early stage. This way you benefit from our expertise. So our conclusion is that don't wait until Vida becomes mandatory. Companies that take action now not only ensure regulatory compliance, but also create the basis for more efficient and future-proof business processes. So how can SEEBURGER help you? With SEEBURGER at your side, you reduce this whole complexity. We have successfully implemented more than 500 projects in the area of invoicing and CTCs in both B2B and B2G environments, also internationally, making us an experienced and reliable partner. So our solutions are services are used in several countries, and offer you a central end-to-end platform for all scenarios. The global invoicing service includes all functions you need for legal, compliant, and efficient implementation of your invoicing process, whether invoicing, sending, or receiving, clearance models, real-time reporting, or text reporting. Everything can be handled using standardized, combinable modules. This way, you get customized solutions from a single source, still based on a scalable standard. The platform is highly flexible and future-proof. It can be run on-premise, in the cloud, or as a hybrid model, depending on your needs and your IT strategy. And a special feature of our solution is the deep integration into SAP system. So with SAP certified add-ons and adapters, our services can be integrated directly into your existing SAP system without the need for a complex SAP redesign. Your processes stay where they belong, so in your ERP. At the same time, you use the full power of our global invoicing service in the background. Our platform covers the entire business relevant document cycle digitally. So in addition, the electronic invoice can also be processed and send purchase orders, delivery notes, credit notes, tax declarations, and more. This creates a continuous digital information flow, which improves not only compliance, but also your process quality. So overall, with SEEBURGER, you not only have the right solution, but also the right partner to meet global invoicing requirements securely and at the same time make your process future ready, efficient and compliant, also with the regard to Vida. Thank you for your attention, and that's from my side.